Our movie classic later tonight at 11:40 stars John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara in The Quiet Man. John Ford's exuberant comedy about an American, Wayne, who returns to his native Galway where he just might pick himself a nice, quiet Irish bride. That's here on 1 at 11:40 tonight. Over on BBC2 in a couple of minutes, their film, The Flamingo Kid, is a warm-hearted American comedy about a young man coming to terms with his family and himself.
Tomorrow, BBC1 takes off into '88 with a new series of Bergerac and an assignment to protect the mother of a supergrass from an underworld kidnap plot.
Why the hell does a villain like Reggie Betts want to drag his mother over to live with him? Needs must we? When I got round the East End that Reggie wasn't just out, but living the life of Riley at Her Majesty's expense and grassing like a lawnmower. Suddenly half the villains in London were out shopping for someone near and dear to him to get out of it.
Reggie, £500,000 quid's worth of stones can buy a lot of choice and security. Me and Tony'd be happy to handle negotiations for you.
Why, Mummy, what big eyes you've got.
Listen, Inspector, I didn't ask to come over to this dump, and nothing I've seen makes me want to stay.
Look, Lola, be reasonable. A bit of shopping's one thing, but night clubbing with Charlie Hungerford's something else altogether.
Impossible. I haven't even started yet.
Bergerac returns tomorrow at 8:15 in the new season on BBC1.
In about 20 minutes, there's comedy in Alan Ayckbourn's play Way Upstream about a riverboat holiday which turns into a power struggle as craft and crew sail for Armageddon Bridge. That's after the news here on BBC1 with Richard Whitmore at 15 minutes to 10.
The government stops the Observer publishing from the memoirs of Anthony Cavendish, a former MI6 officer. After 30 years, the full story of Britain's worst nuclear accident. Millions watch on television as East greets West on New Year's Day. And up and away, the little bastard takes flight from the attention of the Twitchers. The government has obtained an injunction preventing the Observer from publishing material from the memoirs of a former MI6 officer, Anthony Cavendish, who sent 500 copies of his book Inside Intelligence to friends as Christmas presents. Yesterday, he gave an undertaking to the government that he wouldn't publish it more widely. But government sources said it was feared that the Observer might publish regardless, since it had refused to give an undertaking that it wouldn't. For more details, Michael Sullivan.
The injunction was granted today by a judge sitting in Winchester, but the news came from Whitehall that the Treasury solicitor had obtained the order forbidding the Observer from disclosing or publishing any information supplied to it by Anthony Cavendish in breach of the duty of confidence to the Crown. Both the Observer and Whitehall agree that attempts had first been made to obtain the newspaper's assurance that it wouldn't publish such material. The editor, Mr. Donald Trelford, refused the first written request as a matter of principle, he said. The government had no evidence of intention to publish anything. Today, he said, there was another attempt to obtain an informal indication that he would not publish. He refused that and telephoned the judge to ask for the matter to be postponed until tomorrow. The judge said that could be put to the Treasury solicitor, but, said Mr. Trelford, the next thing he heard was that the injunction had been granted.
I do find it quite outrageous that the government should rush around in a frenzy on public holidays, clearly stung by the spycatcher verdict. And I think it's significant, too, that the first news of this injunction didn't emanate from a press association in Winchester, where you'd expect it to, but from Downing Street itself, and that the only people briefing on it tonight are in Downing Street. It seems to me that the government really is stung by the spycatcher verdict and is determined somehow to reverse it, but we're going to fight them.
Tonight, Downing Street said that the injunction against the Observer applied to any other newspaper, but that because the Observer's rival, the Sunday Times, had also declined to give assurances that it would not publish material supplied by Mr. Cavendish, an injunction against that newspaper would be sought tomorrow.
A highly critical report on Britain's worst nuclear accident has just been made public after 30 years. It includes some scathing comments on the 1957 Windscale fire, which was suppressed at the time by the Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan. He was afraid that undermined public confidence in nuclear power, and damage our relations with the United States. The fire at Windscale in Cumbria, now known as Sellafield, was in the number 1 reactor, where nuclear fuel was turned into plutonium for Britain's atom bombs. Huge fans blew cold air over the reactor to cool it. It became hot and went up the chimneys into the atmosphere. When the fire took hold, radioactivity was blown up the chimney. Fortunately, filters at the top caught much of it and prevented a bigger disaster.
On the Sellafield skyline, 2 chimneys still stand as evidence of the accident. They're on top of reactors closed down as a result of the fire, which led to clouds of radioactive material being released. As a safety precaution, for several weeks, milk from cows over a large area of Cumbria was thrown away. The Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan, decided not to publish the full report of the private inquiry. Papers released at the Public Records Office show why. He was concerned about the hostile reaction there would be, both in Britain and also in the United States, where it could affect the exchange of nuclear secrets between the 2 countries. The key conclusion of the secret report was, in our view, one of the lessons of the accident is that the Windscale organisation is not strong enough to carry the heavy responsibilities at present laid upon it. The authors discovered there hadn't been a relevant operating manual. Technical changes weren't always notified, and there was no lift, so that if technicians were to carry out vital temperature checks, they had to climb 70 feet. Other papers show the extent of the cover-up. There's plenty of evidence in these files of the big difference between what was said by the authorities in public and what they said in private. In public, it was said that the steps taken after the accident were prompt and efficient. In private, it was admitted that no proper emergency plan existed either at local or national level. It was said in public that there was no danger to anyone's health. In private, it was admitted that they weren't really sure what level of radiation in milk supplies was safe. The Atomic Energy Authority point out that they were at the start of a major program for producing electricity from nuclear power.
Well, I think you have to realize that at the time we were embarked on a civil nuclear power program with reactors of a quite different design from the Windscale ones. We were clearly anxious that public confidence in our competence to develop those reactors and use them to generate nuclear electricity should not be risked and hazarded as a result of this accident.
But nuclear protesters believe the full story should have been told. They're convinced people died from the long-term effects.
Forensic experts are trying to find the cause of the fire which killed 5 members of a family in their home in South Wales. 4 children died in the blaze, the youngest 2 months old and the oldest just 6 years. Firemen called to the house in Merthyr Tydfil tried unsuccessfully to revive them and their father, Frederick Watkins. A 5th child was rescued and is being treated in hospital. Their mother, Yvonne, escaped with minor injuries.
The alarm was raised by the children's mother, Mrs. Yvonne Watkins, who ran screaming in her underclothes from the burning house. Her husband Fred and 5 of their children were still inside asleep, and as flames shot from the windows, Mrs. Watkins and a neighbour tried in vain to get them out.
She was screaming, she was running back and forth, you know, trying to wake her husband up because he was upstairs as well, like, you know, but to get the children out.
Firemen arrived within 6 minutes of being called, and they got the family out. Heart massage and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation was given on the pavement, but Mr. Watkins and 4 of his children, aged between 2 months and 6, were dead. A 5th child, 5-year-old Camille, was taken with her distressed mother to the nearby Prince Charles Hospital, where the little girl's condition is said to be critical. It's believed the blaze started in a downstairs living room. It's possible that the fire could have been smouldering for some hours before it burst into flames.
The leaders of the 2 superpowers have appeared on television in each other's countries to deliver New Year messages. Mr. Reagan and Mr. Gorbachev took the opportunity to tell tens of millions of American and Soviet viewers of their hopes for a new arms treaty, this time cutting long-range weapons. Our Moscow correspondent Brian Hanrahan reports on the broadcasts by both leaders.
The message from the White House went out in the middle of a popular evening's viewing and contained an explanation of why the United States disagreed with the Soviet Union on some major issues.
Добрый вечер. Я Рональд Рейган, президент Соединенных Штатов.
Borrowing a Russian translator's voice, President Reagan said that on human rights, America considered silence a form of falsehood. He also defended his commitment to Star Wars defences as a contribution to a safer peace. And there was an unmistakable reference to the war in Afghanistan.
Too many mothers, including Soviet mothers, have wept over the graves of their fallen sons. True peace means not only preventing a big war, but ending smaller ones as well.
The price of the broadcast was that the Kremlin should get equal access to American television, with the Soviet leader displacing the lucratively sponsored football matches. Mr. Gorbachev echoed the president's hopes of a new disarmament treaty, but made no reference to the possibility of a Moscow summit. But he did say that during the Washington summit, he discovered the immense potential for goodwill of the American people.
Let me assure you that Soviet people, too, have an equally great stock of goodwill. Putting it to full use is the most noble and responsible task of government and political leaders in our two countries.
The new year is the major non-political holiday in the Soviet Union, celebrated with fir trees and decorations. The style this year is brighter and lighter than in the past, in keeping with Mr. Gorbachev's aim of making life better for ordinary citizens.
Australians have begun a year of celebrations to mark the 200th anniversary of the arrival of the first settlers. But at the opening ceremony, the Prime Minister, Bob Hawke, said the treatment of Aborigines in the past should not be forgotten. This report from Christopher Morris.
A spectacular start today for Australia's birthday party, destined to go on and on for the rest of the year. 16 million Australians are celebrating in style the moment in history when the first fleet of ships with 1,000 European settlers, mostly convicts, arrived along inhospitable shores 200 years ago. There are, however, mixed feelings about the celebrations among Australia's 300,000 Aborigines, who've declared 1988 a year of mourning for their ancestors killed by early white settlers. Prime Minister Bob Hawke, launching the Bicentennial, along with the Governor-General Sir Ninian Stephen, reminded Australians to learn from past mistakes, though warning protesters that never before have so many acknowledged the wrongs done to the Aborigines. Among late arrivals for Australia's celebrations will be these vintage cars leaving London today on the largest such endurance rally ever attempted. Officially, it's not a race, but there was no hiding the spirit of competition as the drivers, including 3 British teams, set off on a journey down under, likely to take 3 months or more.
Now, with news of today's sport, here's Rob Bonnet.
Liverpool continue to dominate the race for the league championship. Their England international Peter Beardsley scored twice today in a 4-0 defeat of Coventry. John Aldridge and Ray Houghton were the other scorers as Coventry became the 6th team this season to concede 4 goals at Anfield. Liverpool were helped by the inconsistency of the clubs immediately below them, amongst them the current champions Everton, who were at Sheffield Wednesday.
Sheffield Wednesday had the best of the early attacks, but too often they failed to grasp golden opportunities. It took a Wednesday goal in the 36th minute to bring the game to life, Mel Sterland's cross finding Mark Proctor. Everton's fight back in the second half lacked energy. The well-organised Wednesday offside trap caught many, including the Everton number 8 Graham Sharp. A goalmouth clearance by Larry May in the closing seconds helped Wednesday retain their 1-0 lead, a New Year warning for Everton, who return to Hillsborough for their third-round FA Cup tie a week tomorrow.
Paul Gascoigne and Mirandinha of Newcastle United scored the goals which beat Nottingham Forest 2-0. The result left Forest 13 points off the lead. Arsenal drew at Portsmouth 1-1, and Manchester United could only draw 0-0 at home to Charlton. Queen's Park Rangers beat Southampton 3-0, and they go back above Everton. Terry Fenwick made his debut for Tottenham today after his £500,000 transfer from QPR, but it was another England international, Chris Waddle, who caught the eye in Spurs' match against Watford. It was his cross which forced Mel Rees into an error from which Clive Allen scored 19 minutes into the second half. Watford, at the bottom of the league, may owe their position to uncertainty about their future ownership, but 2 minutes later, Mark Morris put them level. The game was settled, though, just a quarter of an hour from the end. Waddle again with the cross, and 19-year-old Paul Moran scored his first senior goal for the club. Tottenham 2, Watford 1. There was a remarkable finish to the day's main race at Cheltenham. Membersome, written by Robert Bellamy, came from the back to beat the favourite Knockhill. Peter O'Sullivan is the commentator.
And Knockhill looks as though he's got one fence now between a three-timer in this long-distance marathon over 27 fences. He gets away from it quite well, but West Tip is coming to challenge him. The fall away was master plan. Memberson is still challenging. It's Knockhill now from West Tip and Memberson. Memberson putting in a tremendous challenge. It's Knockhill from Memberson. Memberson beginning to get up as the race towards the line. He's going to win it. Memberson has got up to win it from Knockhill second and West Tip third. That's the result of the ASW handicap chase.
Membersome the winner by 6 lengths from Knockhill, with the former Grand National winner West Tip third. The latest round of the World Cup Ski Jumping Championships met with a serious problem: no snow. But the event in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, West Germany, went ahead anyway. The ramp had to be covered with artificial snow after the recent warm weather. The emergency measure was enough to get the championship underway again. Matti Nukinen from Finland won the 90-metre event and took the lead in the World Cup standings.
Well, despite rain, hundreds of bird lovers had an exciting start to the new year with the arrival on our shores of an exceptionally rare visitor. A little bustard was sighted in Dorset, having strayed here from the Mediterranean. Bruce Parker reports.
Up to 2,000 bird watchers have come from all over the country to catch a glimpse of the rarely sighted little bustard. About the size of a small turkey, it's not been seen in this country for 12 years. It's been feeding and roosting in the New Forest for 2 days now, but sightings like this one are rare. But the little bustard is particularly graceful in flight, and those lucky enough to see it today were more than delighted.
I think there's people from everywhere. There's certainly people from Newcastle and Devon and sort of all around. Yeah, it's a very elusive bird. It's the first one for 12 years, and not many people saw that one.
If the little bustard remains in this country, hundreds more bird watchers are expected to flock to the New Forest this weekend.
Well, that's it from the newsroom on New Year's Day. From me, good night.
Good evening to you. The weather last January the 1st was virtually identical to today, so I suppose it'll be interesting to see if the rest of the month turns out to be the same. From my own point of view, I sincerely hope it doesn't. Anyhow, there's no sign of any cold weather at the moment, at least not to speak of. We're going to keep in this run of southwesterly winds, quite strong winds at that, and the weather looks like remaining fairly changeable with frontal systems such as these bringing cloud and rain across from time to time, although the winds will be turning more into the west, so it'll be a little bit colder, I think, in the days ahead. Now, on the satellite picture, a lot of cloud you notice across the country a short time ago. Another lump of cloud out here in the middle of the Atlantic. That's beginning to get its act together. That'll produce a fair bit of rain across the south late on tonight and at first tomorrow. At the moment, the worst of the rain's gone, I think, from most of Scotland and Northern Ireland, just 1 or 2 showers following along behind, but most of England and Wales still pretty misty and murky, with rain and drizzles scattered about. Some northern areas will tend to sort of dry up during the course of the night, but on the other hand, many central and southern parts, even perhaps up into the north as well. Later on in the night, another spell of quite wet and windy weather coming along as well. The wind is a feature of tonight. It will be very windy indeed, especially around some of those western and southern coasts. But at least in the south, temperatures are going to hold up. Another very mild night, but a colder night than of late further north. Perhaps the temperature just low enough for a touch of ground frost in some of those sheltered glens of Scotland. Now, tomorrow morning in the more central and southern parts of the country, it is going to start off quite dull and wet, misty too, some fog lapping in along those coasts, and a fair bit of heavy rain. Further north, the day dawning quite bright, but not necessarily dry, because there will be a fair number of fairly blustery showers around, especially in the west. During the course of the morning as well, the rain further south moving away and being replaced by a lot brighter weather with some sunshine and just 1 or 2 showers. So tomorrow it's everybody really ending up in the same boat of sunshine and showers, but the showers certainly heaviest in the west and north. Talking about the west, a very windy day in store, at least ending up very windy, the wind freshening up, gales coming along in the latter part of the day. Temperature levels down on those of late. I think you'll notice with the wind that it will feel somewhat colder than it has done. Now, if you're off onto the continent this weekend, the weather's looking far from settled, except in the Mediterranean, where there'll just be 1 or 2 showers and a fair bit of sunshine. A lot of rain around tomorrow in many places, but I think probably during the course of the weekend, that rain moving off into the more eastern areas of Europe to be replaced by the sort of weather that we're going to have here tomorrow, a mixture of sunshine and showers, and just the chance maybe of some snow eventually on the Alps, but more about that on BBC2 after Ski Sunday. That's it. Good night to you.
This Sunday, see for yourself how last year's licence fee was spent as BBC1 invites you behind the scenes in a 2-hour special report.
You never go into the programme at 6:30 with a running order which stays the same throughout the show.
Virtually everyone in the newsroom now sits in front of a battery of consoles which in effect put each of us on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise.
Hello, BBC London! Can we come in and talk?
Let's hope they are talkative.
They'll be very talkative.
Very elderly gentlemen.
Yes, I know. Yeah. Well, they're all upstairs having a good time together.
That's right. Get a few drinks into them quickly.
If you do not giggle, you will be shot.
See for yourself on Sunday at 8 on BBC1, followed by a chance to ring in live to the BBC's DG and chairman in an open-air special.
And now on BBC1, we join a crew of Alan Ayckbourn characters for a riverboat holiday, which will take them way upstream.